Hello and salutations, my fellow philosophers. Welcome back to the Philos-Hippie Podcast, in which we explore the intersection of philosophy and spirituality so that we can live more holistic and meaningful secular lives. Now, in order to celebrate Valentine's Day, the holiday of love, we're going to go on a deep dive into the philosophy of love and eros today. Because modern culture has a very specific and oftentimes narrow-minded approach as to what love actually is. I'm hoping that philosophy and spirituality can show us a more holistic perspective on what love is, because it is such a core aspect of our lives and even reality that we would be absolutely remiss to not truly understand what love is on a deeper level. So today, we're going to talk about what love means in our society today, explore the many different types of love which exist, and last but not least, figure out how we can begin to train ourselves in the art of loving. So, to begin today's philosophical analysis, it will be prudent of us to take a step back and get a clear view as to how love is currently viewed in modern culture today. You see, our culture is obsessed and almost addicted to the concept of love today. It is constantly glibbed about in every trashy love song, the focus of reality TV shows like Love Island and The Bachelorette, and it's all over book talk as well. I mean, romanticy is one of the most popular book genres around right now, even though a lot of its writing is complete and utter trash. If you're observant, you will notice that all of these instances praise romantic and erotic love above all else. It's as if that's the only form of love our culture can recognize today, even though that didn't always used to be the case. In fact, the notion of romantic love, where love is shared between two people who exhibit erotic passion for each other. In fact, the notion of romantic love, where love is shared between two people who exhibit erotic passion for each other, is a rather recent phenomenon in the span of human history. Because for most of human history, love was a mere economic proposition established through the institution of arranged marriages. People married each other not because they loved each other, but out of sheer necessity and survival, because oftentimes it meant the combining of families' assets and resources, which increased the family's overall net value and chances of success and survival. It wasn't until the rise of industrialization in the 18th and 19th centuries that love and marriage took a massive shift in our culture. You see, elder matchmakers often used to be the only way young lovers were introduced to each other, and these matchmakers were only exposed to the people in their small hometown in which they grew up in their entire life, and rarely they ever ventured outside of. But with the rise of industrial factories in the heart of cities, many people left their sparsely populated farmlands for the hustle and bustle of the city, in which many new kinds of people from all walks of life gathered together. This, alongside an ever-growing individualist attitude in the culture, thanks to the Protestant Reformation and all that, this allowed young lovers for the first time to meet new people without the intrusion of elderly matchmakers, and they were able to make their own free decisions as to who they could marry. This is how the ideal of romantic love became entrenched in our culture, and this is around the same time that the Romanticism movement was in full force in effect. Of course, there are still many examples of romantic, passionate love before the Romanticist movement in the 1800s. Look at Romeo and Juliet, the Song of Solomon in the Bible. Look at Romeo and Juliet, for example, or the Song of Solomon in the Bible, or the myths that surround Aphrodite and Ares, for example. However, this was overwhelmingly the exception rather than a steadfast rule. Breaking free from the institution of arranged marriages was a very positive evolution for humanity in my eyes. You see, romantic love and marriage should not be forced upon anyone, because everyone's agency should not be compromised for such an enormous life decision. However, it was in the later stages of the Romanticism movement, at the end of the 19th century, that romantic love began to possess a darker and more sinister undertone beneath it. It was around this time that Nietzsche's proclamation of the death of God was beginning to be heard all around the world, and many people were unable to fill the God-shaped hole that once filled their souls and hearts. So, people inevitably began to deify their romantic partners in order to fill that God-shaped hole in their heart. Robert A. Johnson, a post-Jungian psychologist, wrote in his book, We, Understanding the Psychology of Romantic Love, that, quote, in our culture, romantic love has supplanted religion as the arena in which men and women seek meaning, transcendence, wholeness, and ecstasy. Modern Western man seeks a spiritual experience of romantic love without realizing it. We aren't consciously interested in wholeness, and we don't believe in the spirit anymore. For lack of any other channel, our religious instincts has migrated almost completely into the arena of romantic love. This is why that we feel that our lives are meaningless except when we are in love, and why romantic love is the single greatest psychological force in our culture today. There is this prevailing attitude in our culture that all of our personal problems will be solved once we find true love, that other half that completes our souls. The problem with romantic love, however, is that it deifies our lover and places unreasonable expectations onto them that they can never hope to achieve, even if they wanted to do so out of love. We project onto our lovers the need for them to fill every important relationship in our life and simultaneously ask them to be our lover, our soulmate, our best friend, our co-parent, our spiritual guide, and so much more. Not only this though, we project our spiritual and existential desires for them to give us meaning and purpose in our lives and to solve our existential angst and despair. We have placed the beloved on the altar of worship, and this is why breakups can be so painful. It literally feels like the God we once worshipped has died, and that they just no longer exist anymore. This is why romantic love can be so dangerous in the modern era in our nihilistic and secular age today. Our idealized projections we place onto our lover will inevitably crash and burn, and this can have disastrous consequences in our life. We may grow to resent our partner for not living up to our expectations, and this can create disillusionment with love altogether. Romantic love is seen as our only source of salvation in modern culture. However, this can be further from the case, as we'll explore later. So, after exploring what modern love looks like today, this begs the question: how else did love used to look like in ancient times? It should be no surprise that the ancient Greeks had some profound insights into the nature of love in this regard. Perhaps one of the greatest philosophical texts in all of Western history is Plato's Symposium. In this dialogue, Socrates and his closest friends all have a massive drinking party, in which they have a friendly competition and giving praises to the god Eros, the Greek god of love and desire, while examining the true nature of love in the process. The Symposium is a richly layered text, and if I wanted to elaborate further on each of the speaker's speeches, I would need to devote an entire episode just on the Symposium. But we do not have time for that today, unfortunately. But we will in the future, so stay tuned. But anyways, what you need to know for this episode mainly is Socrates' perspective of love, or eros in the Greek. This is the type of love they exclusively talk about in the Symposium. Eros has a few connotations established to it in normal Greek parlance. Eros usually meant sexual and passionate love, and is where we get the word erotic from. But Socrates has a very different interpretation of erotic love. You see, Socrates gets his idea of eros or love from a wise priestess named Diotima. And whether or not she was a real historical person is besides the point here that Socrates is trying to make. Unlike his fellow peers, Socrates does not think love or eros is a Greek god, nor a human, but rather an intermediary spirit called a daemon. Socrates says that eros was the offspring of necessity and lack, or poverty. It is this universal spirit or force that exists inside everyone, which invokes in all of us a passionate desire for the higher things which we lack, namely the form of beauty. This Platonic ideal of beauty is what we all yearn for in our lives, according to Socrates. And to explain what the Platonic ideal of beauty means in simpler terms, try to imagine in your mind the most beautiful thing of all existence. It could be God, the creation of the cosmos, whatever encapsulates beauty in its truest essence. Of course, this is basically impossible for us to conceive because Plato thinks that all that is beautiful in existence is a mere imitation of this eternal form of beauty, which Diotima speaks of. However, love is at its core desire for Socrates. And desire must mean that we yearn for something we lack, because to desire something means that we do not possess it. Because humans are mortal and will lose our youthful prime someday as we age, all of us lack beauty in its truest essence. And because we lack access to the truest form of beauty, we desire the closest thing to it. This is where Socrates' scala amoris, or ladder of love, comes in. Unlike Aristophanes' earlier explanation in the Symposium, Of true love being that urge in us to find our second half, our soulmate in this life that will complete us and achieve wholeness. Love actually urges us towards the good, the true, and the beautiful, for Socrates and Diotima. On the first rung of the ladder of love, or the scala amoris, love begins with erotic desire for the individual. When we are in the prime of our youth, it could be said that we are in the closest alignment we will ever be towards embodying this form of beauty, because we are at the peak of our physical attractiveness in life, and so erotic love begins as passionate sexual love many times. However, we later realize that as we age and mature, that our youthful beauty will eventually fade away, and that constant pursuit of youthful beauty is rather shallow because its nature is inherently fleeting and transient. We then raise ourselves up to the next rung of the scala amoris, or ladder of love, when we learn to love and honor the inner beauty of a person's personality or soul, which is closer to the form of beauty than mere physical appearances. For example, we may become completely enraptured by our lover's kindness or courage or viewpoint of the world over their physical appearance. However, true love still yearns for more than this. Because these traits are found in abundance throughout the world, we begin to desire the cultural arts, sciences, virtue, religion, spirituality, because these are the sources that inculcate these traits in us, and so it brings us closer to the higher ideal of beauty. The ladder of love essentially motivates us to expand our initial erotic love of individuals in the particular towards the root causes, the structures, the source itself in life that creates virtuous traits and invoke awe and curiosity in us of reality itself, which will inevitably lead us towards the last rung of the ladder of love, of the transcendent platonic form of beauty itself. This beauty is, quote, beauty absolute, separate, simple, and everlasting, which without diminution and without increase or any change is imparted to the ever-growing and perishing beauties of all other things, end quote. Love initially has us desire earthly beauties that, the more we mature and grow, we naturally desire to gain deeper connection with the eternal, for the archetype of beauty itself. This doesn't mean that we forego our romantic relationships so that we can ascend this earthly material plane towards spiritual enlightenment or anything like that. But rather, this understanding of platonic love helps to enrich and deepen the ways in which we experience love in this life. It helps us gain greater appreciation of beauty in all its myriad forms by expanding our capacity to love from mere physical appearances towards the inner beauty of someone's personality, the cultural works and virtues of humanity, and the highest form of beauty itself. And one way in which we can gain greater appreciation of beauty in our lives and expand our capacity to love is by expanding our notions of what love actually means and what it entails. Take what you will from Plato's Symposium, because there are a lot of valuable insights to glean from it. However, eros isn't the only kind of love that the ancient Greeks recognized. For starters, the Greeks were much wiser than us by not restricting something as profound and special as love to just one single word in the English language. In fact, the Greeks had 6 different types of words to describe love in its many faceted dimensions. Now, we've already talked about eros already, so I won't talk much more about it anymore. But the 5 other kinds of ancient Greek love are philia, storge, philagia, xenia, and agape. Now, let's examine each of these in greater depth. Philia is the kind of love shared with a deep friend or fellow equal. Philia is best known today as brotherly love, and it requires virtue, loyalty, and mutual goodwill. Philia is companionship, comradeship, and was essential for living the good life and achieving eudaimonia for Aristotle. What's crucial to understand about Aristotle's use of philia in friendship is that he thought there were 3 specific types of friendships one can have. They are rooted in utility, pleasure, and virtue. For Aristotle, utility friendships are the connections and business partners you've made while networking and are only your friends because of what each person gets from the other. Friendships of pleasure are what we commonly think of when we think of friends. They're your drinking buddies, your friends you hang out with outside of school and work and go on vacation with. And lastly, you have virtuous friendships. This is the most perfect and complete form of friendship in Aristotle's eyes and was absolutely necessary for living a flourishing life. This friendship, philia, is shared between good and virtuous people who recognize the good and virtue in each other. And because of this, you admire and inspire each other because of this, and you help each other on your personal paths to growth and development. These kinds of friendships only wish the best for each other and will help each other in their personal journeys towards embodying virtue. Virtuous friendships are the most enduring and truest form of these three types of philia in Aristotle's eyes. Now, I wish I could elaborate more on Aristotle's concept of philia and friendship, but this episode is already starting to get too long, and I want to be able to eventually devote an entire podcast episode on this idea in the near future. So, if you want to learn more about this, I recommend reading Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics in the meantime. But anyways, the next type of Greek love is called storge, which means familial love, especially of parents and children. And this is where we get the myth that storks deliver babies to new families. Okay, I'm just kidding. Storge doesn't apply only to familial love, but could also represent the patriotic love one has for their nation or the enthusiasm they have for their favorite sports team. What makes storge stand out amongst other types of classical love is its commitment to commitment. Storgic love is the kind of love that is in it for the long haul. It's the kind of love that makes parents or animals die for their children if need be. Now, I actually don't know how to pronounce this next love in the Greek, but philatia is next on our list, and it's best translated as self-love. The Greeks divided philatia into a negative and positive kind of self-love. The unhealthy side of self-love is rooted in egoistic narcissism, and the healthier side is self-compassion. Human history since the dawn of Christianity has typically viewed self-love as a moral flaw because of its inability to separate a healthy amount of self-esteem from prideful vanity. So it's a very positive development in humanity that self-love is now becoming much more mainstream and is now recognized as absolutely essential for proper mental health in the 21st century today. Now, next on the Greek list of love, we have xenia. And this is best understood as the ancient Greek concept of hospitality, and is usually translated as guest friendship or ritualized friendship. It was seen as virtuous in ancient Greece to treat foreigners, travelers, and even strangers with hospitality and grace. In fact, xenia is derived from the word xenos, which means stranger. Xenophobia is the exact opposite of xenia, and I only wish our country was able to have a better grasp of xenia today. Plato even viewed xenia as a moral and political imperative in his dialogue, The Laws, because it is crucial for not just the stability, but also the expansion of his ideal republic. Homer's most major works, the Iliad and Odyssey, could also be seen as an ode towards xenia. The Trojan War was kickstarted in the Iliad when Paris was a guest of the king of Sparta, but Paris abused his host's hospitality by abducting Helen of Troy. The Odyssey could also be an ode to xenia, where Odysseus and his crew is constantly relying on the help of strangers to help aid in their travels home from the Trojan War. Xenia is essential for any political entity to not only exist, but to thrive and to evolve, and it's crucial for the establishment of human relations in general. And last but not least, we have the Greek word for love, agape. In classical Greece, Homer used the word agape to refer to affection or fondness, whether it be for a spouse, family, or a particular activity. However, the New Testament completely reinterprets agape in a new light. Agape, according to C.S. Lewis in his book, The Four Loves, he says that agape is a selfless love that's passionately committed to the well-being of others. Say what you will about Christianity as a religion, because I have many things to say about it. But Jesus, as a teacher of unrestricted love, is someone we can still extract a lot of wisdom from today in our secular age. What made Jesus' love so radical during his time and even today is the inherent unconditional and self-sacrificial nature of agape. No matter the context or circumstance, Jesus loved anyone that came into his presence, whether it be his friend or foe. Agape is not constrained to the love of the individual or their friends and family, but rather opens itself up completely to the love of all humanity. What's important to understand that no one ever told me when I used to go to church was that agape or unconditional love like Jesus displayed does not mean you have to feel passionate affection towards people unlike eros. Rather, agape is closer to a compassionate state of being and general orientation one has towards the world. You can feel nothing and still act in agape. Or even if you do feel passionate affection for everything, you can still fail to love in agape because of that. Eros reaches out because it lacks, but agape stays because it overflows with compassion. Agape asks for nothing while giving itself away entirely. The purpose of me examining these ancient modes of love is not just because it's fascinating, but it's meant to show that classifying love in this way helps us to see that true love isn't only romantic love as we think of it typically in our culture today. Constraining love to only one word also constrains our experience of love in daily life. By assigning more words to love, we are opening the doorway for us to express love in countless ways in our lives. It also places romantic and erotic love on a lower pedestal by raising the other kinds of love onto an equal playing field, showing that there are countless ways we can show love to humanity. Understanding the different kinds of love is the first step we need to take if we want to learn how to love ourselves, others, and the world more. But how else can we craft ourselves in the art of loving? This is where the work of the Frankfurt School philosopher Erich Fromm comes into play. Erich Fromm opens his 1956 groundbreaking book, The Art of Loving, with the following line. Love is the only sane and satisfactory answer to the fundamental problem of human existence. End quote. As we will see later on, Fromm has a very unique idea of what love is. But first, what does he mean that love is the answer to the fundamental problem of human existence? To put it simply, the problem is our awareness of separateness. When we are born into this world, we were yanked out forcibly from the comfort and security of the womb and are forever separated from the unity we experience with our mother. Man is gifted with reason according to Fromm, and that we are, quote, life being aware of itself, end quote. This awareness is a double-edged sword, however. We are blessed to be able to think rationally for ourselves, but are also burdened with the weight of the knowledge that we are a separate entity disunited with nature. Not only that, but we know that we will all die someday, and we'll have to watch our loved ones die, and we'll have to make our loved ones suffer when they are forced to watch our own deaths and go on experience living being separated from us. Erich Fromm writes that, quote, the experience of separateness arouses anxiety. It is indeed the source of all anxiety. Being separate means being cut off, without any capacity to use our human powers. Hence, to be separate means to be helpless, unable to grasp the world, things and people actively. It means that the world can invade me without my ability to react. The deepest need of man, then, is the need to overcome his separateness, to leave the prison of his aloneness. The absolute failure to achieve this aim means insanity, because the panic of complete isolation can be overcome only by such a radical withdrawal from the world outside that the feeling of separation disappears. Because the world outside from which one is separated has disappeared. End quote. This is what all religions and spiritualities try to fundamentally answer. How can we feel at one with ourselves and the world in which we live in and ease this burden of separateness? When we are alone, we do not possess all our normal human faculties that make us whole. This inevitably makes us subhuman in a sense, because we are not able to withstand the sufferings of the world, which makes us insane and forces us to live in a perpetual state of panic and existential anxiety. The only way we can fulfill our need to overcome our separateness and leave the prison of our aloneness, according to Fromm, is through love. Now, this is one of the only times on the Philos-Hippie Podcast in which I will endorse all hippie cliches that love is the answer, the solution to all our problems, because honestly, in my opinion, I think it is. The thing that most hippies get wrong, though, is that they think that love is primarily a feeling and comes from good vibes and good highs, rather than thinking that love is a practice, an art that we must all train ourselves in, so that we can cultivate this attitude in everything we do. Fromm writes that, quote, love is not primarily a relationship to a specific person. It's an attitude, an orientation of character, which determines the relatedness of a person to the world as a whole, and not toward one object of love. If a person loves only one other person, is indifferent to the rest of his fellow men, his love is not love, but a symbiotic attachment or an enlarged egotism. Yet, most people believe that love is constituted by the object, not by the faculty. End quote. In our culture, we are of the mindset that if we find the one, then we will immediately fall in love. We think that our love is only attached to whatever object we place our love onto. I love him. I love her, I love them. And when we lose that person, we also lose that love. This mindset, however, is a product of our consumeristic culture that thinks if we buy the right thing, then we will be truly happy. But this couldn't be further from the case. Love is not constituted by the object of our desire, but a faculty that we must train according to Fromm. Love is an inner human capacity that we must learn to cultivate and naturally exhibit in our everyday lives. Love is not something that happens to you because of your lover, but rather, love is something you do because of who you have become. Love does not come from finding the right person, but rather through becoming a loving person. This is what the art of loving entails. How we can become the most loving person we can aspire to be. This is why he says that, quote, love isn't something natural. Rather, it requires discipline, concentration, patience, faith, and the overcoming of narcissism. It isn't a feeling, it's a practice, end quote. These are the initial steps to take to hone our art of loving, to cultivate discipline, concentration, patience, faith, and selflessness. Now let's break down what these traits actually mean one by one. For starters, we must realize that true discipline is needed to love constantly. And this means that we love even if we don't feel like it, because again, love is not a feeling. Love is not dependent on mood, but rather your mind. Fromm writes that, quote, love is a decision, it's a judgment, it's a promise. If love were only a feeling, there would be no basis for the promise to love each other forever. A feeling comes and it may go. How can I judge that it will stay forever when my act does not involve judgment and decision, end quote. Disciplined love requires us to constantly make the decision to love others no matter the cost and no matter the circumstance. In order to be disciplined about our commitment to love, we must harness deep concentration so that we can remain steadfast in our goal for love to become our innate state of being. Being able to focus is crucial not just for the art of loving, but any art that we want to gain mastery in. But in regards to love, Fromm says that, quote, to be concentrated means to live fully in the present, in the here and now, and not to think of the next thing to be done, end quote. True love asks us to sit still with those in front of us, and to give our undivided attention to them, because this is one of the most loving things anyone can do. Because our attention is one of the most prized possessions all humans possess, and we should not give it away willy-nilly, especially in this attention economy. And if you want to learn more about the power of attention, check out my last episode, The Contemplative Life Under Capitalism, to learn more. But anyways, in our attention economy, where everything is striving to steal your attention, being able to look up from the phone into the eyes of your loved ones is a massive act of love and steadfast commitment right there, because it shows how much you truly care and love for them in that moment, away from the pull of the phone. Just like with anyone desiring to master any skill or art or craft, you must be patient about the level of your progress. If you're after quick results, you will never make any progress in the art of loving. But patience is also crucial for loving others, because in order to concentrate in our interactions with people, you have to be willing to take the time out of your day to be in their presence wholeheartedly. Patience asks of us to be with our loved ones for however long they ask of us, and to also be patient with others who make it hard to love. Now, we've just talked about how the art of loving requires discipline, concentration, and patience. But how is overcoming one's narcissism also required of us? Fromm writes that, quote, the main condition for the achievement of love is the overcoming of one's narcissism. The narcissistic orientation is one in which one experiences as real only that which exists within oneself, while the phenomena in the outside world have no reality in themselves, but are experienced only from the viewpoint of their being useful or dangerous to one. The opposite pole of narcissism is objectivity. It is the faculty to see people and things as they are objectively, and to be able to separate this objective picture from a picture which is formed by one's desires and fears. All forms of psychosis show the inability to be objective to an extreme degree, end quote. This is why he also says of narcissism that, quote, it is the earliest stage in human development, and the person who in later life has returned to this narcissistic stage is incapable of love, and in the extreme case, he's insane, end quote. To love others requires us to view reality with an objective lens, unfiltered by our own narcissistic judgments and biases of the world. Not being able to view things objectively does not allow any room for empathy and sympathy, to breathe room into our lives, and this makes us incapable of viewing life from the perspective of those around us, which is absolutely necessary in the art of loving and the overcoming of narcissism. Developing these personality traits is crucial for honing the art of loving. But there's one last thing that's also necessary for Fromm. If we make the art of loving a continual practice of growth and commitment in our daily lives, then, quote, this process of emergence, of birth, of waking up, requires only one quality as a necessary condition: faith. The practice of the art of loving requires the practice of faith, end quote. However, for Fromm, faith does not mean belief in God or religious doctrines. He asks us not to have blind faith, but rational faith. Quote, rational faith is not primarily belief in something, but the quality of certainty and firmness which our convictions have, end quote. Fromm highlights how this is played out in the real world because scientists and artists have rational faith. Every scientific breakthrough has occurred whenever a scientist was researching and hypothesizing towards a vision of what they expected to find. Every artistic masterpiece happened when the artist had a vision of their creation in their minds and had faith in the process that it will come to pass and that it will come to be. Having a rational vision, in Fromm's words, is crucial in the art of loving, because we must have an ideal that we are striving towards regardless of what others may think, and we must have faith in our convictions that our love will have a tangible impact on the world. Quote, faith in oneself is a condition of our ability or promise, and since, as Nietzsche said, man can be defined by his capacity to promise, faith is one of the conditions of human existence. What matters in relation to love is the faith in one's own love, and its ability to produce love in others, and in its reliability, end quote. Having faith means, as much of a hippie cliche as it sounds, believing in the power of love to transform the world. Having faith in others means seeing the inherent good in people and believing in their potentialities to rise to goodness. Even though people's opinions may change, having faith in others means standing firm in the conviction that their basic motivations won't change, because every single human on the planet is ruled by the desire to be loved and to love others no matter how much they forget about it. It simply doesn't matter if I love others that don't love me back. Because of my own faith in myself and the power of love, I know that it will cause them to be affected by my love either way. This is how we grow to have faith in ourselves as well, by recognizing that we too are ruled by the desire to overcome our separateness from others in the world. We see that the yearning for love motivates us in every aspect of life, whether we know it or not. But when we become conscious of our need for love, we grow steadfast in the knowledge that our ability to love is directly proportional to our ability to receive love, and that if we give our love willingly to the world, then we can rest at peace in the fact that it's making an impact on the world. This faith in ourselves and others and the power of love can be summarized as simply having faith in humanity as a whole. This means remembering the fact that all humans are love junkies that are trying to seek union with others in the world we live in. And because of this, love is the most powerful force in the world. And deep down, we all want to climb up Socrates' ladder of love in order to climb towards transcendent wholeness and towards transcendent beauty. So, as we come to the end of this Valentine's Day meditation on love, I want to return to where we began. Our culture tells us that love is something we find, something that happens to us when the stars align and the algorithm finally gets it right on dating apps. But what philosophy and spirituality together have been whispering to us across centuries is something far more demanding and far more hopeful. Love is not an accident. It is not a commodity. It is not a mood. Love is a way of being in the world. The art of loving is its own philosophy as a way of life. From Plato, we learn that Eros is not meant to trap us in fixation on one beautiful body or one perfect person, but to educate our desire, to stretch it upward and outward until beauty itself becomes our horizon. From the Greeks, more broadly, we learn that love wears many faces: friendship, philia, family, storge, self-respect, philatia, hospitality, xenia, and unconditional compassion, agape. And that a life impoverished of these forms will always feel incomplete no matter how intense our romances may be. And from Erich Fromm, we learn perhaps the most unsettling truth of all, that love does not depend on finding the right object, but becoming the kind of person capable of love. If love is an art, then it asks of us what every art asks. Discipline when it is inconvenient, concentration when we would rather escape, patience when progress is slow, humility when our narcissism flares up, and faith when results are invisible. Not blind faith, but rational faith. Faith in ourselves, faith in others, and faith in the quiet but stubborn power of love to soften separateness and remind us that we all belong to one another. So maybe the invitation this Valentine's Day isn't simply to celebrate who you love romantically or to mourn the absence of that kind of love if it's not present in your life right now. Maybe the invitation is larger. To ask yourself not, am I loved, but how am I loving? Not, have I found the one, but am I practicing the art of loving? Because if Erich Fromm and Plato are right, then love is not something waiting for us out there in another person. It is something waiting within us, just waiting to be cultivated. And once cultivated, it naturally spills outward into our relationships, our friendships, our politics, our spirituality, and our care for the world itself. And in a time marked by isolation, tyranny, and fear, choosing to practice love in this way may be the most radical, insane philosophical act we have left today. Now, thank you once again for listening to the Philos-Hippie Podcast today. I hope your heartstrings were pulled by it, and I hope you'll join me next Friday on the podcast. And also, the podcast is now available on Spotify in addition to YouTube. Until next time, I wish you all boundless wisdom and metta. Peace. Others, and faith in the quiet. I'm right there, bro.